Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jenny, and I'm here today to start off the second BookTube Prize vlog for round 2. And I am reading in nonfiction group D. And so in this video, I'm starting off with Paradise Falls by Keith O'Brien, the true story of an environmental catastrophe. So I've already been reading this now. I am halfway, so I thought I would just start right off with an update at the beginning. So I went into this knowing that I have actually read Fly Girls, which is by Keith O'Brien. I listened to it on audio a few years ago, and I really enjoyed it. So I had a lot of anticipation that I would like this book because I was familiar with Keith O'Brien's writing style, and that is certainly the case. He's very good at writing nonfiction. He writes it in a he really delves into character studies of people, and he really leads you into his subject matter that way. And I find that very effective because as a character-based reader of fiction, if you give me a few people that I can latch onto right at the beginning of a nonfiction story, it really helps me to move through the subject matter. But he also delivers the subject matter here in a really concise way. He's not getting overly technical or overly detailed about anything that's not really pertinent to the overall arc of the story of Love Canal. So if you're not familiar with Love Canal, this is a particular area of New York near Niagara Falls and Buffalo where the Hooker Chemical Company buried a whole bunch of discarded chemical residues in the ground. And subsequently, a whole housing development was built on top of it. And at some point, those chemicals started leaching out of their containers and causing really strange environmental effects along with health issues for the people living there. And so this is the story of how the people fought back against this and try to get justice, try to save their homes, try to save their real estate, the value in their real estate, etc. So, so far, there is the homeowners committee is created, and they are fighting, and they are, going as far as confronting Jimmy Carter when he comes to visit during a campaign trail for the governor at the time. Carey was his last name, and they're trying to get resolution because there's not really resolution happening. There's a few people who are given some money to buy back their homes, but they don't really expand the affected area wide enough to cover the people the rest of the people who are being affected by this. It was right over a school. It was right over a playground. It was a really serious environmental disaster. So yeah, so far really enjoying this, and I will check in again with you when I have finished it. The other book I'm going to be reading in this vlog is An Immense World. I haven't started it yet. I'm hoping to finish this one this weekend if I can, and then start in on An Immense World because it is very popular, and I've already had it for 5 days and I haven't started it, and I'm going to have to give that one back on time because there'll be someone else in the waiting list at the library for it. So that's where I am in this vlog. Come along with me and I will tell you some more about this once I've finished it. Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to wrap up Paradise Falls, this true story of an environmental catastrophe by Keith O'Brien. So I enjoyed this very much. I thought he did a great job outlining the details of the situation. His writing style very much focuses on the people more so than the minutia details, so there wasn't a lot of data or that type of stuff, which I would have found kind of would have brought me out of the story. He very much focused on the people and the people angle and the people that were being affected, the people that had the control to change things, and the ultimate result of the situation. And so it was a really solid read. I would say, if you want to learn about, what happened at Love Canal, this is a very good book to read. I do think I've seen a film about this, and I kept trying to jog my memory while I was reading it, and I can't remember if it was a documentary or a feature film, because I know there was a feature film made about Lois Gibbs, who was one of the most, the loudest activists in the area, and in the movement of trying to get people to be moved out of this area. There were parts of it that I found kind of sad, in the sense that, I don't think that the people who are responsible for this were really held accountable. I think Hooker Chemical did end up paying some money, but ultimately, you see the way the corporate world works, and you see that does not benefit everyday people, the way people, oh, but you get jobs, and oh, but you get this, and it's like, yeah, but then you poisoned the land, and you poisoned us, and you really didn't change much of what you were doing. So I don't know what the practices are now for chemical companies and how they dispose of waste. It is a scary thing to think about, though, in the face of the environment as it is now, that we just don't know what's happening to these chemicals, where they're going, who's breathing them, or where we're playing, and whether or not they're nearby. So so a lot to think about, and overall this was really well done. I can't say right now, after reading 3, which is my top. I still think it might be Dinners with Ruth. I'm not sure. I guess I would put it Dinners with Ruth, Paradise Falls, and then We Don't Know Ourselves. That's the order I would have it in right now. So I'm going to check in again with you in this video when I am halfway through An Immense World by Ed Yong. Hi everybody, I'm halfway through An Immense World by Ed Yong, so I thought I'd check in with you. Okay, so how to talk about this. I have read, when I'd read the introduction and the first chapter, I was very encouraged by what I read, because it was very good, it was very interesting, and laid out in a very accessible way. I still feel that way about this book, but as I progressed further in, I came to know what I had suspected all along, and that is that this is not a me book. And that's no fault of the author or the subject matter or anything, because I totally get the people that would love this book, and I understand why they would love it, because it's a really great science book. It's about animals, it's about the way humans through science study animals and are trying to study their senses, but also reflecting on how limited we are as humans, because our senses are only ours, and so we can't understand and perceive often these different senses that other animals have, because in these different ways of processing the senses, because we don't have them, and so we're limited and inherently biased because of our own limitations there. So it's a really interesting premise, and I do find parts of it interesting. But overall, this is just not my type of book. I would do much better with this type of subject matter if I watched a documentary film, because I'm not interested in studying down to small detail. And I don't think the author focuses a ton on a lot of small detail here. He's really trying to make it as accessible to as many people as possible. But for me, I'm just not a person that really gravitates towards or enjoys reading science. It's just not something that that I retain. Like, I don't retain it. I mean, I'm sure most people don't, unless you're studying something, you're not going to need to retain it. But I also find, when you start to talk about chemical names and numbers and tiny details like that really fog up my brain. I just don't pay attention to them. And then I start to disconnect from the text in general because of that. The other issue I have is that not every chapter is like this. So some of the chapters I find he really keeps the theme present and I can follow through. Other chapters, he tended to jump a bit too much between too many different animals and too many different scientists studying those animals. And I know he was trying to do that to show variety and to show the extent of like the sense that he's trying to convey. But for me, it's too much. I just don't care about this one particular fly and the way this fly can perceive things and like to that, even to that small amount of detail that he's sharing. To me, it's not that interesting. It doesn't hold me. So I I feel kind of bad because I have a feeling right now this is going to be a low book for me, and I know that is probably not going to be the norm, and that a lot of other people are going to put this up at the top. And I get that, I really do. I understand why people would love this. It's just really not my type of book. So it feels almost unfair that I am judging this book because it's just not a subject matter that I gravitate to, or that I feel like to me, this type of a book cannot win a nonfiction category for one whole year because it's not going to appeal to enough people. So yeah, that's where I am with it right now. I feel a little bit behind, even though I'm not. I'm halfway through this book. I have 2 more books to read. It is May 7th. It is not May 7th. It is May 10th. It's May 10th. I have 20 days to finish these books. I am planning to finish this book as soon as possible. So if I have today and I have Friday where I can do a lot of reading, I want to get this book done by the weekend and start the next one. Maybe start the next 2 and just read them together. I try to read them one at a time when I'm reading them in physical form, but I am starting to get a little bit of anxiety about the books because all of the books I got were over 300 pages, except for one. So, that, and one of them was like a 22-hour audiobook. So, yeah, it's a lot of nonfiction. And, like I said, when you're not really completely engaging in the book. Oh, the other thing I'll say about this book, which I don't know what other people who are reading it will think, is the way he's done. They're not even, I don't know if you'd call this a footnote. So you're reading and there's an asterisk. And then if you follow the asterisk down, you're going to get supplementary information about that statement he just made. Now, I don't usually read notes when I'm reading nonfiction unless I need to study, unless I'm studying and it's like a really important thing. And these little anecdotes that he puts in here, or this little further information, are often like interesting enough. They're like expanding on a certain animal that he's talking about. But when you're talking about getting through a book that you're already reading stuff that you're not going to retain and that you're not that interested in, and then you've got these little notes at the bottom, it starts to feel like a lot of extra text. And it's like, if it was important enough to put it down here, why wasn't it important enough to incorporate it into the whole text in general? And if it was a footnote, why can't it be at the back of the book as a footnote as opposed to being here where I feel like I'm supposed to read it, but I don't really want to read it because it's taking me out of this narrative. So I find that a little bit problematic in terms of how the book is structured. And I started off by reading every single one. And then I realized if I keep doing that, it's going to take me longer to read this book. And it's not the main text. And if they were footnotes at the end, I would not read them. So I'm not going to read those either. Unless I get to something and I think, oh, that's really interesting. And then I go down to it because I want to read more, then I might. But it's not the main text. It's set out in a way that it's like, oh, if you're interested in this, read this. And I'm not, so I'm not going to read it. So that's a kind of a weird thing I find about the structure of the book. I think that's the first time I've ever seen a book do that. And I'm curious as to why they would want to write it that way. If it's that interesting, put it in the main text and incorporate it into the narrative. And otherwise, put it as a footnote at the end that someone can go and reference if they choose, but they don't feel they have to read it because it's down at the bottom of the page. All right, I will check in again when I have finished An Immense World. Hey everyone, we're having a crazy heat wave in May here, mid-May. It's in the high 20s, almost 30 degrees Celsius for us, which is really, really high for May. Anyway, I finished An Immense World by Yong last night, so checking in. I don't think my thoughts on this have changed that much. I think this is very well written. There's a lot of interesting information in here about animals. So I learned, that birds follow the electromagnetic field of the earth and like some really interesting little things in here. And I can understand why this book is popular and why people like it because it has, a great... It just explores all these different animals and the way we don't know things. I think that good science books are usually books that share how much we don't know about the world rather than all the things we do know. And it ends with a bit of a treatise on sound pollution, noise pollution, and how much they affect these animals and how they're contributing to these animals losing their way. He used an example of the 9/11 light tower and how when that's lit, it disrupts the migration of thousands of birds because the light is so bright and it goes so high that it distracts them from their migrating path. So just things like that we don't really think about. I don't think we think about the effect of our actions on animals nearly enough, especially when we're building things like towers and just, it's not something that we contemplate much as humans. And I think this book is trying to encourage humans to think about animals and how different they are and how we could make a world that considers them a bit more. So, it's a great book. It's not a me book. So I'm a little bit torn because to me this is, I know that this is, I think I'm going to have a really hard time actually ranking these books because they're all good. It's not like any of them are bad, so I'm going to have to put them in a ranking regardless of the fact that they're all good. And just because this isn't my style of book, it's probably going to get a lower ranking, but that's not because this isn't a great book to read. It really is. And I know if you love science books, if you love books about animals, you will most likely like this one. There's a lot of animals talked about in this book, way more than animals, insects, reptiles, just so many. more than you can really retain the information about, but it's still a really great book. So that concludes vlog number 2 of the BookTube Prize Round 2 Group D. And I will check in with you about my next 2 reads in the next one. Thanks so much for watching.